Hi, Romi. Thank you so much for joining us for this Color Visions interview. How are you doing?
I'm fantastic, thank you. Making the most of this period, trying to use it positively, should I say?
That's great. It's a pleasure to have you here. Before we begin, what color could define your mood in this moment?
I think right now, if I think of a color, I'm going to say blue, just because I'm thinking of the ocean and the water.
So let's do some blue for the interview.
Brilliant.
And get a little deeper. What color, what memory could this color trigger for you?
So blue straight away takes me to the sea, takes me to the water.
Okay,
and for me, a lot of my most recent amazing memories have been around the water. We started doing sailing trips for my members every year. We used to take them on a sailing trip around the Greek islands, and there's just something so freeing and therapeutic about the water that it's amazing.
It's soothing.
It's soothing, exactly, but also it's quite calming, and it's got its own life and its own world, and it's so powerful. So yeah, no, I do love the water.
Absolutely.
But it's interesting, the blue that you have, I guess, is a different blue in my mind, because the blue that I can see is a much richer blue. So that's I was, in my head, I'm thinking of more lighter turquoise. Yes, like a lighter turquoise blue, whereas the darker blue that I see there has got a different connotation. It's much deeper. It's kind of, actually the first thing I think of when I see that blue is Kanye West and his church sessions he does, because he uses light in his music, in his church sessions.
Right, yeah, I've seen that.
And that's one of the ones I was lucky, because they're not all public, but when I saw it, it had that blue color in it.
That's great. I try to tone it down a bit for you. And Romi, what is your passion in life?
My passion is bringing great and interesting people together. That's what I love most.
Okay, that's great. And what do you do in life? What is your field of expertise?
So funnily enough, I'm one of those people that I managed to convert my passion into my career and my job. So my company, the Oblique Life, is all about bringing people together, building communities, whether they're, with our members club, which is for individuals to come together for common purpose, to drive impact, or if it's for my corporate clients, where I help them as organizations, build more positive and corporate cultures that resonate with society and, what our souls and people feel.
Okay, great. And what does the Oblique Life do exactly?
Yeah, so the Oblique Life, that's what it does. We have these two products, the Members Club, which is which is for the B2C side. So we curate a set of different experiences. We bring people together. We allow them to share ideas and meet people of similar interest. That's the Members Club. So you're part of this private community of interesting minds, people who really believe and are passionate about things. And then on the other side, we have a B2B product, which is with the corporates, where we basically help them build cultures that are more resilient, cultures that are more aligned with the future of workforce, and basically help leadership understand how they can build teams for the future.
Okay, that sounds great. And from a personal perspective, how are you navigating this pandemic? How is it going for you?
I think it started like quite tough, because on a personal level, my wife, her family is based in Greece, my family's in the UK, and we live in London. So there was some, challenges of where should we be physically. That's already, one aspect. And then my father and my brother would be considered high risk patients. One has asthma, one is a recovering heart patient. So we weren't even able to necessarily be around them, given, the distancing. So that was quite stressful on a personal level. And on a business level, we do a lot of we've had a philosophy of helping people meet in person. So if it's for our club, our events are all in real time with real people. If it's for our corporate clients, we used to host physical workshops for them. So there was a big, shift we had to make in our mentality. But interestingly, it's kind of that shift and then having to think in a different way has made us stronger. I feel we've pivoted and we've delivered and changed some of the products that we offer to be relevant for the current time. But also, we found a way to keep authentic to what we are. That has given me this confidence and satisfaction. And actually, I feel in a very good place. I was saying to Valerie earlier in the call, I just said, that it's funny that it's at times like this where people who are authentic and really passionate about what they do can come through, because you can see that and I feel I'm one of those people with my two brothers, my co-founders, who are able to rise through. But it still comes with its challenges, and I think that's part of life, right? It's just you have to put perspective on it. I'm so lucky to be in Athens right now and have a home and have everything that I could need, when there's so many other people who don't have basic conditions, and they're forced to have to stop their jobs, and they can't even pay for their next meals. So it's all about perspective for me. So I think it's a great time to take a bit of a time back, introspect, and just catch up on some Netflix.
For sure. I guess everyone's doing the same on that side. You talked about the different impact that this crisis is having. Like, some of us are more lucky than others. What do you think? What do you see for the aftermath of the pandemic? What do you think people and humans need after this?
I think it's a great question, but it's quite a complex one. I mean, personally, I'm more on the boat that I don't think the world is going to change as much as I think some people are saying it will, and not because we're not going to learn, or we're not, this hasn't shaped us. But I think we have to remember that a lot of people, as soon as things are allowed to go back to normal, will straight away just continue where they left off, and that's just human nature, And I think there's a lot of push and a lot of we're influenced by the institutions and the barriers that are put in place around us, whether it's government, businesses, families, communities. So some things will go back, but I do think we're going to start having a real, a rise in more questions. I think people are going to ask themselves a lot more about what they want. I think the interesting thing that we've seen is we've built this world, we've built structures in place, particularly in the workplace and the way we live our lives. Everything needs to happen in a certain way. And that's broken down. So that's going to be an interesting evolution. And I think, one thing I think is going to be really more apparent is in the workplace, you no longer have to work in an office to work. However, it is nice to work in an office, and there are some benefits. So I think what it will make people do is really be much more honest about why they want to do things, and there'll be more flexibility. So you'll see that side of it. I think on a wider and more macro level, maybe more philosophical level, I think we're going to go into a new period where we're going to have a real clash of ages. I feel like the younger generation, now the millennials having been through two crises in 10 years, are now going to be looking, because there's going to be a lot of economic impact from this on a lot of people around the world. And I think the young people are just going to have had enough. And at some point, they will want something back now from society in the sense of support, and they need to drive their own lives. So I think we're going to start seeing a bit of clash in terms of the older pension retiring population and the younger population, particularly in the Western world, which I think is going to be interesting and also powerful, because I think young people are going to start putting their voice out there, and they're going to want to be heard. And that means changes in the way we live, changes in the discussions we're having, and being more open about some of the mental health problems we have, physical issues, the cultural, the diversity issues. So that's going to be interesting. And I guess the last thing is, I think if anything this has shown is that together we need, the world is fragile, and this pandemic has shown that we need to work more collectively together. So I hope, and this is the hopeful side of me, that people will come together and start seeing ways of trying to make a more sustainable future, whether it's just from a society's perspective, environmental, economic. And I think, people they don't want to see and be in this position ever again. So yeah, there's a lot of change. So in essence, I think, yes, there's going to be a lot of changes, and I think we're going to be asking a lot more questions. There's going to be some challenges we're going to go through economically, but ultimately, it's a great chance for us to really reflect and take the world that we live in into a new direction.
Well, for sure, you're actually stepping on my next question, which is, do you think this could create new values for our society? As you say, with the dialogue, that's going to be the questions that will be rising and everything. Do you think we can create new values as a society, and maybe how this will change and affect the way humans interact?
I think rather than new values, it will just make us really think about, first and foremost, what are the values that we have in society? I think if you look at society generally, and we had a discussion last week with my members on the topic of faith, and the idea that faith is something that's kept communities and groups of people together because there's a common belief and a common value structure that underlies this. I think we will have to start thinking about what our values are, but I think what we've got too much in the habit of is sharing our values to kind of almost in a marketing way. So we talk a lot about what we feel or what we think, but actually there's no practice in what we preach. And I think that those values are going to come up much more in the next phase. And I think, people are going to be asking ourselves, if these are my true values, what am I actually doing to live by these values? Am I honest to who I am? So yeah, I think we will have a stage of reflection. I think also we're going to have to start looking at society and saying, what are our common values, within our communities, and discussing that, because I don't feel that, I think there's a lot of fractured societies across the world. And I think, when I talked earlier about the age battle that I could see maybe potentially happening, I think one of the ways to solve that and to stop that being a problem is looking at the values. And if we all see that, if all communities and people and religions and nationalities have similar values, well, that's a great starting point to have more progressive discussions. So yeah, I think, look, I hope they come into play. I think they definitely will be discussed, but I think it's a missing piece, and this whole reason why a lot of people feel so lonely and lost, and I guess mental health is becoming a big issue. For me, more of it is just people, they don't know, they can't discuss, they don't know where their values are. So that discovery process hopefully will come back. I hope I answered your question.
Absolutely. No, and I totally agree. And a bit earlier, you talked about going back to the office and how businesses are going to move. How do you see businesses adapting and changing their practices after this? And do you think actually that company leaders will care more about their employees' well-being?
Look, I hope they will, because then that will be good for my business and what I'm trying to do. But I think, it's in terms of the way we work, there's a few things at play. One is the fact that there is already and has been happening a real change in the way we're going to be working. They call it the future of work, the evolution of technology and automation of jobs. And there's a lot of, research that's been done by people much more qualified and much more experienced than myself. And I think that was something that was already in play. I think what this crisis has done for that is, there were a lot of fears by organization and leaders about having people working remotely and having people disconnected physically, and whether that's going to impact productivity and performance. I think what will emerge is that it's not the actual physical, whether you're working remotely or whether your team is in London and Poland and Malaysia. No, it's not about that, but it's how are leadership actually connecting this team. So for me, the real question is, there was proof now that teams can function remotely. So remote working and flexible working will no longer be a question, but inevitable. I think what it will do is it will give people the chance to say, I want to work in the office. I like working in the office. I don't like working in the office. I want to work a few days from home. And there is no advantage or disadvantage for either. That's something that we have to work through. But I think what will be interesting is how do we make management and leadership better? Because I think for too long, the question about good leadership or management is everyone on, let's all be under the same roof. And by spending time and watching and micromanaging, I'm managing. No, what you're doing is you're basically, you look like you're managing, but you're not asking and listening, and you're not looking at the real problems. So managers will have to get better. I also think and hope that there is an evolution in the sense of the role of management is very important. And I think one of the issues we have in the corporate world is management is seen as a promotional tool. Instead, I want to see more corporates thinking X is a manager and X is a product person. You're fantastic at your product. This is the reward for doing well at your product. Y over there, your management is fantastic and you help the product person deliver what they can do. That's a good team. So I think that's what we maybe will see evolving.
More,
but
exactly, yeah.
Yeah, and I think, you know, it's about looking at what your real skill set is rather than in an older model of, yes, your seniority and your reward is based on your position. I think we have to move from that. But I think, you know, when your question is what will change, people will start asking those questions. I also think that leaders, and I think the millennial generation, are going to have more of a voice in the next, after COVID-19, because I feel that, you know, even though they, like I said, they would have been hard done by, people would have lost jobs, people would have been furloughed, people would have had to take a pay cut. That in itself will energize the group to start pushing for more and fighting back. So they will be listened to more. And the new working style suits them much better. They're more adept to it as well. So it all will tie together. Yeah. And I think the last thing I would say about the way organizations work, I think it's hopeful to think they'll change their cultures fully and they will progress. I think, you know, one thing that I think will slow that down is in the initial phase is because the governments have been so supportive and backed people. I think unfortunately, it's a good thing because people have kept jobs. But I think what that's also done is it's allowed some of the weaker and more, I would say, toxic institutions to continue to operate. Whereas, and you know, the positive ones might not be able to rise through. So that natural evolutionary cycle of the survival of the fittest might not have happened. So maybe it'll take a longer time, and maybe in 2-3 years we'll see that change. But yeah, if that answers your question.
No, absolutely. And Romi, it really has been a pleasure to hear you talk and to hear your visions. We totally align on so many of it. And so really, thank you so much for sharing your vision with us. And I hope we can have a talk again very soon.
Me too. And thank you very much for inviting me and asking me to be part of this incredible opportunity. Thank you.